Well, we're back. In terms of moth trapping, hopefully, we have a few spots of rain here at Lound Wood on the 12th of January. It's a nice sky, that is. And it looks as though there is a shower heading this way, which is now going in front of the sun. In a few months' time, the sun will be setting along the line of the hedgerow here on the right of the screen by the time we get round to the longest day. Just shows you how much the sun moves around the sky. But a very mild afternoon, and well, it's been a very mild day today. There's been almost a 10-degree difference in temperatures. We've had sub-zero temperatures on a night time and very cold days right since before Christmas. And as we're here now on the 12th of January, it's mild enough to warrant coming out and getting the trap out. Mind you, looking at that sky, it's well worth a run out here just to record that. It's a beauty. Well, it's not as breezy as I thought. It has been quite breezy at times today, and it appears to be just becoming less breezy now. Quite pleasantly nice conditions. Temperature on the way here was 9.5 centigrade, and I will be trapping for only about 2 hours. Temperature's forecasted to drop to about 5 tonight, and then over the forthcoming nights it's going to be lower than that. So tonight is the ideal night, really. It's the only opportunity I've got to trap for probably about a week. Whether I trap just here, just inside the entrance to Lound Wood, or I'll go further into Lound Wood, I don't know. Time to have a wander and find out. Well, as it's still light and we're still about half an hour or so away from firing up time, I thought it might be an idea just to go through the equipment that I use to trap moths. Now, the term trap moths is rather misleading because I don't actually trap them. I attract them more than trap them. Some people don't like the term trapped. But the moths are free to come and go entirely as they please. I only take moths home and put them in smaller containers for identification purposes and for photographing on the website, and they are brought back to the same site of capture the very next day. So no moths are trapped long term, and no harm comes to the moths that are attracted to this light. This is the most important piece of equipment, really. It's a 125 watt mercury vapor bulb. Mercury vapor light is generally regarded as being the best light for attracting the largest numbers of moths, and it certainly does the job. MV bulbs run very hot, and so the bulb has to be sat in a porcelain lamp holder. You can't use a plastic one because that will just melt very, very quickly. But on startup, the amount of electricity to this bulb needs to be regulated, and so we use what's called a choke, or sometimes it's called a ballast. And I have that housed in here. It's been in here for donkey's years and still works perfectly well. Once the bulb is up and running, it takes about a minute to get to full power and full brightness. Then I'm presuming that the choke has done its job. But of course, what produces the electricity? Well, you need a portable generator, or you can get sort of portable batteries, but a generator is by far the best way to go. But I understand why people can't always have a generator. There are some that are extremely heavy, some that are quite light, most are quite expensive, but some aren't. And I'm very pleased with the generator that I use. Well, what generator I use has been asked of me quite often, and it's this. It's a Sensi 1100 to 1200 watt SC 1400i inverter generator. and it's really good as well. And in terms of generator prices, you can pick this up at just a few £100, and it's very good value for money. I've had no problems in the couple of years that I've had this. I would recommend it to anybody. It is a lot lighter than the generator I used to have, which was incredibly heavy. But you may think, if you pick one of these up full of petrol, that he doesn't know what he's on about and that it's far from light. But in terms of generators I've had before, this is very light indeed. And the only other thing to remember, if you're using a petrol generator, sight it on level ground. And I always sit mine on a plastic tray. That's just in the event of any petrol spillage. But I always make sure that I top the generator up at home. I don't carry petrol out and about with me. So basic common sense principles. It's a very easy setup. You can have the whole setup and do it yourself for 300 or 400 quid, including a generator. But if you don't know your electrics, get somebody to help you, or an electrician to do the electrics for you. The trap that I use is completely homemade, and if I can manage the electrics, I'm sure most other people can too. And hopefully these electrics will allow us to attract a few moths as we await darkness to descend here at Lound Wood. Well, what will be the first moth of 2026? My guess and money would go on chestnut. Often one of the first moths to appear out of the leaf litter on any early spring or late winter trapping session. But it could be something like winter moth. There's a number of species that are possible to get tonight, but I think my money would be on chestnut to be the first moth attracted to light this year. We shall see. We're not forced to get anything, of course, but after it being so cold for a number of weeks, it went mild last night during the night, there's every chance that there'll be a few moths out and about flying this evening. Well, just before you think that all this video is him rattling on about nothing, but we have a moth. It's a winter moth, just netted as it was flying past, about 6 feet high, obviously just on its maiden flight of the evening, so to speak. Not the most attractive of moths, but it's a moth, and it's the first moth of 2026. Not unexpected. And hopefully now that the sky is starting to darken, we'll get a few more, maybe a few more of these and a few other species. So a winter moth starts us off in 2026. It may be a dull moth, but it's so nice to be catching moths again. November the 6th it was when I last trapped. That seems like an eternity ago. Well, I was nearly right. You can see that winter moth just fluttering around the light, but there is a chestnut that is in somewhere. I think it's settled down at the base of the light. We'll have a look at it. But there's something else. Well, not the best of angles, but it's sat right at the base of the box that the light stands on, but a chestnut nonetheless, a little bit worse for wear. But these overwinter in leaf litter, from what I can gather. Never found them anywhere else, but I have seen them coming out at the base of brambles from out of leaf litter. Satellite does the same. These are always one of the first moths to turn up at light in the year, and as soon as it gets dark in those early months of the year, and before it jets off, is Satellite. And what's interesting about this one is that you see the single orange dot in the middle of each forewing there, and there's those two little satellite dots at the side of those larger dots. They look quite white, and this is about to go, but this is the orange spotted form of Satellite. And so this one's a female as well, so they are an attractive moth, Satellite, very underrated, and nice to get this species tonight. It's a typical moth early in the year. So that's our second noctuid of 2026, following the chestnut that we've just looked at. And here's the male winter moth from earlier, our first moth of the year. Not very spectacular, I know, but a moth's a moth at this time of year. You have to learn to love and appreciate these dual-coloured moths. Probably been out and about since before Christmas. It is quite warm now, and we'll be out looking for the flightless female once it leaves this light. Well, a real beauty has just come into the light, came in from the far side there, and it's a moth that has probably been flying, say, since maybe November and during December, although it wouldn't have had much chance to have flown during that time. But it's this, look. This is the variable mottled umber, a quite beautiful moth, and as I've just mentioned, it is extremely variable. And it's a real joy to see moths as well marked as this in January. They're not all just dull brown jobs, you know. These are one of the reasons, although it's a very common moth, one of the reasons that always attracts me to trapping very early in the year. It's a belter of a thing, and this one's particularly contrastingly marked. I do like these, and the caterpillars are often regularly found during the summer months. So, species number 4. Well, it's surprising what sneaks in, even when there's not that many moths coming in. Although, I am doing very well, better than I expected. But this is a pale brindled beauty, and the first one of the year. This is another moth that I love to catch. I do love trapping this time of year, and especially after not being trapping for 2 months, it makes you very, very keen, and so any moth is quite exciting. Another fairly variable moth, and another moth in which the females are wingless, and this is a typically marked pale brindled beauty. This isn't the only species which has sneaked in, because in this pot here, I'm waiting for it to totally settle down and then try and get it on the sheet and be able to film it, is another species which has sneaked in. It's another one of my early year favourites, and it's a spring usher, a moth which is, like so many moths, very appropriately named, because it flies towards the end of the winter. Well, it used to. Now is on the wing probably from before Christmas, and like pale brindled beauty is getting earlier, if anything. But this would fly normally from sort of late January onwards, and would usher in the spring, hence the name. They knew what they were doing years ago when they were naming moths. We don't now. But a very attractive moth is spring usher. It can be very variable, like mottled umber. You get some that are very contrastingly marked and others which are less contrastingly marked and can be quite dull, but others can be beautifully and intricately patterned. I do like this trapping early in the year. I think it's just partly through to not seeing many moths for a month or so. It's always nice to get the trap out and to attract these early season moths. We know what species fly and we know when they fly, although they are flying earlier, a lot of them, and you can trap moths on any mild night throughout the winter period, but you need to go into habitats like this really to get any number of moths. And then you're rewarded with species like spring usher and pale brindle beauty and mottled umber. There's another species comes in too, looks like another winter moth. But say we've done very well in this first hour. We ended up with 5 winter moths, 5 chestnuts, also 3 satellites. I'll put a couple of photos in. Mottled umber, 2 mottled umber, single Agonopteryx heracleana, 3 Tortricodes alternella. Now that's not a spectacular species, but there's another species which seems to be getting earlier, or at least if the conditions become mild after a cold spell, they will appear. Eclaris natana is in, and the pale brindle beauty we've seen, and 2 spring ushers which we've also seen. So the temperature has gone down to 7, so the number of moths that might come into the light might lessen a little bit now, but I'm only going to trap till 2:30. I thought that was a Clifton nonpareil then, but moths are still coming in despite the lowering temperature. Not the most exciting of moths this, but I know, but in terms of Tortricodes alternella, this one is an absolute stonker. It's not often that they're as contrastingly marked as this, and you can get some where you can barely detect any difference between the base of the wings and the rest of the wings. But this one is well marked. I may well take this home and take some photographs of it. It's been a while since I've photographed Tortricodes alternella. But this time of year, you get a moth this sort of size and shape, and this one is about 15 millimeters from the end of the wings to the head. You've likely got alternella, and it will turn up in big numbers. But like a number of the species that fly early in the year, they can have been and gone before you've even dusted off your trap, especially with the likes of this species and spring usher. You can very easily miss the peak. But this is a nicely marked Tortricodes alternella. Well, here's a chance to have a nice look comparing these 2 species. You've got pale brindle beauty, which we looked at earlier. That's the upper moth of the 2, and then a well marked spring usher just underneath it. Very similar shaped moths. Pale brindle beauty is always larger than spring usher. Both very nice moths, both favourites of mine. I do love to catch these moths. And Dillis and I, we went a number of years before we eventually started to catch spring usher. It always eluded us. But now it's certainly increased here at Lound Wood over the years, and occurs here in decent numbers, but say easily missed the flights of some of these early flying species. But that's Spring Usher, the lower moth of the two, and Pale Brindle Beauty. Well, 2 hours is up. The temperature hasn't got any lower than 7, which has surprised me. It is forecasted to go down to about 5 by the end of the night. But I've had 2 great hours, very similar trapping session to that of a year ago, and very pleasing in terms of moths. There is still that breeze, but I've more than enjoyed and have been satisfied by the moths that I've caught this evening. So the first trapping session of 2026 is done and dusted. Here's to the next one.